and we'll get the meeting underway.
Can I just get someone to switch the recording on, please?
Fiona, just confirming it's recording.
Thank you. Welcome everyone to this meeting of the East Lothian Integration Joint Board on the 27th of October 2022. The meeting is being recorded and will be made available as a webcast in order to allow access to the democratic process in East Lothian. East Lothian Council and NHS Lothian are the data controllers under the Data Protection Act 2018, and data collected as part of the recording will be retained in accordance with the Council and Health Board's policy on record retention. The webcast of this meeting will be publicly available for up to 6 months. I'll now take a roll call of attendees. First of all, I have apologies from Elizabeth Gordon, from Wendy Hale, and Claire McIntosh and Judith Tate. Are there any other apologies that anyone's aware of? No? Okay, I'll just go ahead with the roll call then. When you hear your name, if you could confirm you're present, please. Jimmy Akhtar.
Present.
Lachlan Bruce.
Present.
Lynn Jardine.
Present.
Carol McFarlane.
Present.
Fiona Ireland.
Present.
Peter Murray.
Present.
Val D'Souza.
I think she's on holiday, Fiona.
Right, okay. Maureen Allen. David Binney.
Yep, I'm here.
Philip Conaglan.
Present.
Lorraine Cowan.
Present.
Claire Flanagan.
Present.
Ian Gorman.
He's on holiday, Fiona.
Thank you. Marlon McNeil.
Present.
Thomas Miller.
Present.
Thank you. John Turville
Present.
and Fiona Wilson.
Present.
We're quorate to begin the business. And can I just quickly ask before we start, do any members have any declarations of interest on any of the items? And we can go ahead with the business here.
Thank you, Fiona. Well, welcome everybody. I didn't say so at the start. A busy schedule, short but nonetheless important agenda items ahead of us. So we'll just get started with the previous minute, which was from the 15th of September. So without going through it page by page, I'll just simply ask or invite any comment on its accuracy. That's all I'm looking for at this juncture. Anything on the accuracy. I will take the absence of any hands as approval. That's okay. I will assume that's the case and move on now to any matters arising from that same report. Again, I'm not going to go through it page by page. I'll just invite any comment from anybody in terms of matters arising that don't feature within the current agenda. Not seeing any hands unless somebody's going to correct me. So that will allow us to move on to our first substantive item, which is my report. I will keep this quite short. Some of you may be aware that quite a lot of people, but included in those lists that I'll make you aware of, chairs and vice chairs were included in a letter that was sent by Humza Yusuf. It was signed by him and Jonah Robinson, and I'll give you the gist of it. I'm quite happy to share it with you, should you wish to see it. But the gist of it in terms of us is that, and I'll read the sentence out just ahead of the list of things that in part will be relevant to us as an IJB. All health boards, health and social care partnerships and local authorities must renew their focus on the following actions. And that list is home first, discharge without delay, criteria-led discharge, hospital to home transition teams with re-ablement focus, hospital at home, anticipatory care plans, and effective end-of-life pathways in strong collaboration with our hospice colleagues. Now, clearly there's more in the letter than that, but that is the salient points from it. And I'll invite Fiona at this point if she wishes to add anything to her response to that since she's received that letter.
Thank you, Chair. I'm always a bit nervous when you say Fiona to catch on to which one out of the three of us on the IJB. So we are collating kind of just a log against the letter actions. John Conahan, our chair, would like to see this, but I've also been in meetings as a chief officer with Kevin Stewart, MSP, and Caroline Lamb, and then we met as chief officers, board execs, I think local authority execs this week with Cabinet Secretary Humza Yousaf, just really to provide assurance from an East Lothian perspective. We are meeting all of these pathways and excelling in some, and that's reflected in our performance in East Lothian to date, but that doesn't mean to say that we take our foot off the pedal, because the important thing for us is supporting people to the right place, keeping them in their own homes, enabling them to be there. So we're continually looking at the pathways and opportunities to support East Lothian people to stay in East Lothian while meeting the kind of end of life care requirements, reablement, discharge to assess. So we're very fortunate, and I know the team in East Lothian have really been ahead of the curve in the work that they have done. So just to provide some assurance around the letter, but also currently what we're doing within East Lothian as well, and that's reflected nationally in our performance. I'll pause there.
Thank you, Fiona. I will invite colleagues any questions they may wish to add, but I think you can be rest assured that we are giving it the appropriate level of attention, as is required of the letter. And as Fiona rightly pointed out, many of these things are our priorities anyway. So I think the letter applies to IJBs up and down Scotland in different ways, depending on where you are with delivery of certain of those particular areas of focus. I'm reassured from Fiona Wilson. I will give you your full name, Fiona, just make sure you don't miss who I'm speaking about. Fiona Wilson has given me an assurance that not only are we performing well in some of those areas, but where we are perhaps needing to just reassure ourselves that that reassurance is being sought. Okay, any questions or comments on that? Happy to share the letter in full if you wish to see it. Shireen definitely, and I and Fiona clearly have seen it. Some others may have. I've got a couple of hands just gone up. So David first, please, and then Lynn.
Hi, thank you. The element about end-of-life care, palliative care, hospice, I was going to suggest, following the meeting yesterday, that it might be prudent and helpful to have a development session which involved explaining how end-of-life care and palliative care operates in East Lothian and the interaction between hospice, between Macmillan and between all the other bodies that are involved in delivering it. It's quite a kind of patchwork, and I found not terribly easy. I'm not sure that I do actually understand, but not terribly easy to understand how it all interacts. And I think it would be helpful to have a better understanding of that, and that's one of the priorities which the ministers or the cabinet secretaries have flagged up.
Okay, if those that are waiting to ask a question would bear with me, I'm going to ask Fiona Wilson just to respond to that, if you wouldn't mind, Fiona.
Absolutely happy to do that. We might have it as part of something, David, just as that wider kind of system, but absolutely happy to pick that up. And equally, Lorraine Cowan, our chief nurse, can also feed in as well if there's anything before we set that up that would be helpful to have a conversation. Happy to do that.
Lynn, if you don't mind, I'm just going to check with John that it wasn't in response to this point that his hand got up. So John, if it wasn't in response to the point, I'll allow Lynn to come in, but was it in response to David's question?
Yes.
Yes. So Lynn, if you don't mind, I'll just let John come in.
It was just a quick comment on what David said, and really to support his idea. I think palliative care and end-of-life care is often not well understood, unless and until you or a loved one is looked after through it. and people often talk about the community palliative care team and are a bit vague about who that is. And it's come up in discussion in a couple of meetings in the last week. And we know that we want to support people to end their lives where they wish to. And for a lot of people, that is at home. It's a quiet success, really, and most of the care is delivered by our district nurses, supported by GPs and the Macmillan nurses as expert advisors who have strong links to the hospices. But it is a good topic for part of a development session, I would think.
Yeah, thanks, John. And Lynn, thanks very much for your patience.
No problem. I mean, just wanted to reflect, Chair, when you were reading through that list from the Minister, I was, despite being a relatively new member of the IJB, I was quite confident from my knowledge from my work elsewhere that East Lothian were already well ahead on an awful lot of that. So I've got every confidence that Fiona and her team will continue that excellent work. The bits that I wasn't absolutely sure on were, what David and John have just been discussing as well. So I'm heartened to it'd be great to be part of a group just kind of exploring that and just making sure how it all fits together. So thanks for that.
No, that's great. Thanks very much, Lynn. Lorraine, I think you are next.
Thanks, Peter. In terms of palliative care and our interface with the hospice, we work very closely with St Columba's, and Dr Brown provides us with input and in actual fact oversees the palliative care specialist nurses, and we have a quarterly palliative care strategic group that I chair, and we look at how we can work together and what developments we can do. And one recent one is Hospice at Home, that was introduced by St Columba's. We're providing packages, and our in-house service were providing packages, and we recognise that the way in which they were being provided is different. So we met last week, and we've now got a single point of contact whereby the packages will be allocated to the right provider, so that we can get the best possible care for individuals to do as John says, and that is ensure that they have the ability to be in their own home and be cared for and have the right support at the right time. So I'm happy to extend the group to look at other things and have other people join us. But there is a good linkage there that we continue to move things forward.
John, do you want to come back in, or is your hand a legacy?
It was just quickly to apologise when I was listing the people who contribute to palliative care. I should have mentioned our home care colleagues, and Lorraine has mentioned them, but they're an invaluable, essential part of the team.
That's very kind of you, Josh. We'll appreciate that. Okay, anything else on the letter or the small content, and most important, arguably the piece of the letter that I've read out? Any other questions or queries on it? Final point for me, I chaired yesterday the care home and community hospital change board. We had a good meeting. A lot of the people that I'm looking at on the screen at the moment are actually participants in that meeting, so I probably don't need to go over much of it again. Safe to say that we made some good progress, and for those that are not on that particular forum, I'm sure that there'll be a communication available to you to advise you on where we're going with that in terms of next steps. Fiona, do you wish to add anything to that, or should I just leave it that we can perhaps put an S-bar out or something along those lines just to let everybody know where we are with it?
Yeah, I think we will continue to dock it and bring to an IJB some of the outcomes at a future date. I suppose what I'm picking up is the enthusiasm in that group, as well as this moving forward, you know, so that we're making changes for the right reasons and recommendations, and using data, evidence, and the engagement we've had with East Lothian over the summer. So that's probably where I'd pause, and more news to follow.
Yeah, okay. Anybody wishes to avail themselves of further detail on that, I'm happy to pick up with you separately, or indeed any of the members of that team. I'm sure would answer any questions should you be minded to inquire. Just before I hand over to Claire now for item 3. Claire, did you find the £50 million we were looking for yesterday?
Not that quickly, Peter, sorry.
No. Okay.
Yeah, so thank you. So the first paper today is the IJB's audited annual accounts for financial year 21-22 and the IJB's external auditor's annual report. So back in August, a request was made to the IJB that the audited accounts could be approved and signed after the IJB's Audit and Risk Committee on the 13th of September. This meeting took place and the accounts were approved and have been signed. The paper today is really just so that all members of the IG have had sight of both documents. I wasn't planning to go through the accounts in any detail, but I just wanted to highlight the accounts received an unqualified audit opinion. And within the statements, there's commentary from both our internal auditors and our external auditors. The IJB's Chief Internal Auditor has supported the annual governance statement within Appendix 1, the actual annual accounts document, and this highlights reasonable assurance on our controls and governances. In this statement, he also highlights some scope for improvement. So on page 32 and 33 of your document pack, you'll see we've got some action points from our Chief Internal Auditor. And I suppose I'm pleased to say that some of these actions have actually started and have been moving forward already. The second appendix document is our external auditor's annual report. Again, this was presented by Audit Scotland and discussed at our Audit and Risk Committee. There's no issues arising from the report, and with only 2 points of action for us. These being the development of the IJB's medium-term financial plan, which is in hand and will be brought back to the IJB later in this calendar year, and the IJB's performance report. And this performance report was presented to the IJB at its meeting in September, so that action is also now complete. Presenting them here today was really just to allow all IJB members sight of both documents and for noting. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. That's helpful to receive that update on the 2 outstanding items that were within the external auditor's report. So thank you for that. I won't invite any questions, although just to make people aware that I'm not already clear on this, it has been through the Audit and Risk Committee, and as Claire has alluded to, it has actually been signed previously. So I'm not going to inhibit any questions should they wish, but just to let you know that's the position as we currently find ourselves. Any questions or queries on any of the content? Not seeing any. Oh, Shireen.
Yeah, thank you, Claire, for your report. Just, I know it's been to audit and risk on page 61, preparing a new 5-year financial plan. That's something that we've not done before, and I just wondered if any discussion took place about the challenges we would face in trying to do that, and is that what other IJBs are doing as well?
Yeah, so we have actually had a 5-year financial plan before for East Lothian, but it was a while ago and it was before COVID. And the reason we've not updated it, well, since I think it was 2019 was the last time we had done a 5-year financial plan for the IJB. We paused it during COVID just because there were so many other priorities. And then as we were coming out of COVID, there was so much uncertainty that it was just proved such a difficult document to make a suite of assumptions around when there was still that level of uncertainty. But I think now we've got a little bit more clarity. So we're developing it in the background to bring back to the IJB. Hopefully at the December meeting, we'll have the IJB's kind of 5-year financial plan. We do 5 years. I think some other IJBs potentially do 3 years. But I just think given if we can give you any more information in terms of longer term, then we'll always try and give the document as much scope as possible. That it's still based on a suite of assumptions and it is a planning document. But yes, it's we'll be pulling that together. Yeah.
Is that okay, Sinead?
Thank you.
Anything else? Anybody? Obviously, you'll be aware that yesterday's announcement of the now autumn statement, I believe it's been called, from Westminster, will have no doubt an effect in our financial planning across the public sector going forward. So Claire, I'm sure, keep a weather eye on that as it evolves and becomes clearer as to what effect that has in the next year and the years beyond. So if no other questions are forthcoming, I will simply ask you to do as it says in 2.1 to note the end of August 22 financial reviews undertaken by partners and note the correspondence from Scottish Government. Yeah, and note the correspondence from Scottish Government regarding IJB COVID reserves.
Sorry, Peter, that was the recommendations for the next agenda item.
Yeah. I thought I'd missed it. Sorry, Claire. I'm going off my head. Sorry, I need to scroll back up to the top. Beg your pardon, I was way ahead of myself. Give me 2 seconds. It's a rather long scroll. Can you tell when something wasn't computing with your head, but you couldn't quite work out why it wasn't right? Right. Okay. Sorry. Note the IJB's audited annual accounts for 21-22, and note the external auditor's annual report for East Lothian IJB for 21-22. We're happy to do that. Yeah. So now we can go to the next one, Claire.
Yeah, thank you. So it's a short finance update today, focusing on the financial projections or forecasts as at the end of August financial reporting cycle. And the report also highlights to the IJB the correspondence from Scottish Government on the reclaiming of the IJB's COVID reserve. So the financial forecast for this year has only slightly changed since we reported the Q1 financial review position back in September. The projected overspend for the IJB as at the end of August 2022 is £1.193 million, so £1.1 million. That was a small deterioration from the position we presented at Q1, and there's been a small deterioration within the projections within our social care budgets. So we documented in the September report to the IJB the drivers behind this projected overspend, and the paper does highlight again the challenges driving this position. A large proportion of the overspend is within our set-aside budgets, and the paper gives some more detail into what that makes up. The next financial forecast update will be the Q2 financial review process, so assessing the forecast again using the first 6 months of financial information. This is a much fuller review undertaken by partners, and it will be reported back to the IJB. So we also document in the paper the current ongoing COVID expenditure within the Health and Social Care Partnership at paragraph 3.7. This COVID expenditure is reported to Scottish Government and is funded from the IJB's COVID reserve, so has no adverse impact on the financial position. Finally, the report makes the IJB aware of the correspondence received from Scottish Government on the reclaiming of the IJB's COVID reserves unrequired balance. We currently don't have more detail than this, and we continue to liaise with all the national networks. We are submitting our Q2 COVID cost projections this week to Scottish Government, and this is done via NHS Lothian and their routine reporting to Scottish Government on a monthly basis. This will be the information that Scottish Government will review to assess what any reclaim of reserves will potentially look like. And I will keep the board updated, but currently we are awaiting national guidance and clarity on the process. And if it's helpful, I'm happy to get the full letter shared round board members. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Any comments or questions on this financial update? Sinead first, then Lynn, please.
Hi there. Thanks, Claire. Thanks very much for the report. It's really clear. Just on 3.7, it was just for us to better understand the COVID reserves and what they're being used for. I know Judith is not here today, but she presented the Chief Social Work Officer's report to Council yesterday, and I know that in a future meeting, Judith is going to present that to the IJB as well. And it just highlighted some of the challenges that we face, and they're around the sustainability in our care services, and how the level of pressure that they're under. So I think I'd be quite keen to find out what the impact would be on any kind of termination of any sustainability payments, for example, to external providers, so we're fully understand what knock-on effect that may or may not have. I think I'd be quite keen to have that, and also just to be have clarity. And you've said that this is on the way, but as an IJB, what are our governance and mechanisms? Because I don't think, you can correct me if I'm not sure we've been in a position to hand. You always want to receive money because we're one of the fastest growing authorities in Scotland, and our level of demand is ever increasing, which you'll see from the Social Work Officer's report. So we always want to try and make sure we're using that to get the best outcomes, and that they're clear about the governance processes for ourselves as well.
Thanks, Siobhan. Do you want to
Thanks.
take that?
Yeah, so in terms of our COVID reserve, East Lothian IJB opened the start of this year with a COVID reserve of £9.7 million. No, sorry, £9.1 million. I'm giving you Mid Lothians, apologies. £9.1 million. And the cost projections that we have submitted this morning through via NHS Lothian, we've put cost projections in of £5.2 million. So across the 4 areas that are broken down at paragraph 3.7, we have just under 2.8 million in for the additional ward in the community hospital. It's worth saying it was 2 wards at the start of the financial year, and is now it's tapered down to 1 ward, so that's why it's quite a high cost. We also have, in terms of prescribing and GMS, we've got £576,000 of COVID-related projections there. In terms of the cost relating to our sustainability payments, that we've put this in as £1.5 million, Siobhan, for this financial year, and I think it's fair to say we've probably been quite prudent around that estimate. Originally, when we done Q1, it was at £750,000. But given the claims that we've seen recently come in through the few weeks through the sustainability panel that sits within the partnership, we felt it'd be prudent to increase that. So we've upped that to £1.5 million, and then a small amount of £380,000 of loss of income within some of our core services within social care, predominantly around the day and resource centres. In terms of so that would leave an unreclaimed balance of £3.9 million. That's what our summary report is reporting back to Scottish Government at the moment. And in terms of your question around in terms of sustainability payments, we have liaised with providers. We share the guidance with them. We have a panel that meets routinely. We're in a lot of contact with providers. We share the guidance. They'll also get all the national guidance through their own networks. But the sustainability payments for COVID will be due to cease at the 31st of March 2023, and all providers have been aware of that for a while now. And what they can claim for at the moment in time is is limited. At the start of the pandemic, there was a wide range of criteria that providers could come and get financial support through the sustainability payments process. It's now really it's only like three areas, and the biggest one being the social care staff support fund. And what we're finding through the panels now is that actually the claims that are coming in are predominantly for social care staff support fund, and they're a lot smaller than the up-to-date claims anyway, not some of the backdated ones, but the up-to-date claims are a lot smaller than they were at the start of the pandemic. And I think that's really all we can do with providers, but we are aware that we might do a piece of work just within the panel, and I think Fiona had discussed this with you about doing some sort of kind of assessment around that risk that's out there with our providers. And in terms of the governance on the reclaiming of the reserve, There's a lot of forums that are getting various different types of professional advice, whether it's legal advice, accounting advice, audit advice on this reclaim. And all I can say is that to date we've been fed back, only verbally, right enough, but we've been fed back as CFOs that there's nothing illegal in this process. So it looks like the transaction could happen. What we don't know is how the accounting technicalities will make this work in terms of the logistics of the process of this. So we're really just tapping into all the national networks, whether it's through the chief finance officers that I sit on or whether it's through chief officers that Fiona sits on. It's really just making sure we're engaged in all those networks and making sure we follow the guidance that comes out from the professional advice that we're getting back.
Okay,
Does that
thank you,
answer
Claire.
your question, Shireen?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Claire. Lynn, please.
I mean, I was initially going to ask similar to Shameen, but I'm struck by the extent to which we don't really have a clear picture of what the guidance is going to be. I wonder if we've got a sense of what that might be, and are there avenues that we can use to try and influence that? Part of asking that is I'm very conscious of what we were talking about initially in terms of the other piece of communication that's come from the Scottish Government about we need to focus on this, this, this and this. But actually, for me, it's very much a balancing act when we've still got COVID around and potentially very vulnerable people within the community that, especially when we're looking at some of the cost of living issues, the frailty fulcrum for an awful lot of older people is not going to be it's not going to be far off a collapse for them. So how do we make sure that there's an argument that goes across to the government that actually we need to be able to maintain the high level of performance that we've got in the community to prevent people going into hospital so that we've still got capacity to deal with whatever else happens around COVID?
Yeah, just before you come in, just Lynn, if you haven't seen the letter that I referred to earlier, better that I share it with you because there is some reference to funding in it that is obviously designed to support some of the areas that I outlined. So, Claire, I don't know if you want to relate the two together because you'll be aware of the funding arrangements in the letter and the direction of travel that we're expected to focus on, as well as a very good point that Lynn's made around COVID ongoing costs.
Yeah, so we've always so I'll take your first point, Lynn, around kind of influencing the guidance in terms of the reclaiming of the reserve and how that'll happen. We do have the chair of the chief finance officers and a couple of the vice chairs are now routinely meeting with Richard McCallum at Scottish Government's Health Finance Department to ensure that whatever process is developed, that it works for everybody. It needs to work for all partners. And I think given that IJB does span local authorities, health boards, at IJB in its own entity, and obviously Scottish Government are involved in this process as well. I think it's going to be I think it's complicated. It's complicated, and they've not. I might be talking out of turn, but I don't think they've got a firm solution yet. But they are trying to work with. So as the CFO network, we are routinely meeting with government to try and make sure we get the best solution. What we have done with our COVID reserves is so sustainability payments, for example, will cease on the 31st of March, and that's national guidance that came from Scottish Government and COSLA. So we won't incur any more costs for sustainability payments next financial year. The Ward 5 that we have open for COVID at the moment, what we're looking to do is that ward would close on the 31st of March as well. But what we are looking to do with so we do see a lot of these kind of COVID related expenditures only being in year. And what we are trying to do is what Peter referred to within the letter regarding the winter priorities, and we've got winter funding through that. And what we are trying to do is utilise that funding to support a whole host of other areas of other infrastructure. predominantly not bed-based infrastructure, but infrastructure across health and social care, so hospital to home, hospital at home, discharge to assess, to try and put more resilience, put more capacity into the system to support through winter. So it's not that we're going to kind of be left with a shortfall or an unfunded ward. We are looking to, I suppose, move the infrastructure around and use the funding that we got for the winter programme to support other models.
That
That's
deals your
helpful.
point, Lynn.
Yeah, that's helpful, Claire. Thank you.
Fiona, Ireland, please.
Thanks, Chair. Claire, I probably should know the answer to this, but in relation to 3.5, is that cost for, or the expenditure for set aside that's attributed to East, attributed on the basis of a proportional percentage, or is it attributed on the basis of our activity that we're using within set aside? And if it is the former, what would the difference be if it was the latter? And I've got a second part to it, what actual influence and action can the IJB take to realistically address that?
So at the moment in time, the methodology that NHS Lothian has for set aside is still based on a pro rata percentage across all four of its IJBs. So it's not based on East Lothian actual activity. It's based on a 12% share of the overall cost of the within the set aside the budgets, and that's a process that's been around for a number of years. NHS Lothian have tried to move towards a process whereby they would charge expenditure to IJBs based on their actual usage or their actual activity, and I think it's proved quite difficult to make that a kind of slick and robust process, and it was getting a bit of momentum before the pandemic, and it's kind of fell a bit off the priority list, but I think it is starting to pick back up, and I know that in terms of looking at activity within set aside, I know that Ian, along with one of my colleagues who I think attended the September meeting, Chris King, who's the finance manager within the partnership, he's been doing a bit of work specifically around trying to understand a suite of activity measures within acute in terms of bed days usage, length of stay, discharges, admissions, just to get a sense of where we sit around, and they've actually done it for all four IJBs, not specifically for East Lothian, so you can see it for all areas, and they have started to share that work back up with NHS Lothian. So I think we're starting to get back into these types of discussions, Fiona. I don't think they're going to be easy discussions, but given the complexity of 4 IJBs with one health board always makes it more complicated, because we need to do, it's difficult to extract an element of funding out of a budget that's shared over 4 areas. But I think definitely these conversations are starting again.
Does that address your question, Fiona?
That answers the first part. I think Fiona Wilson might be about to answer the second part, because I'm not clear on what actual realistic influence we have, apart from creating more hospital at home, hospital to home, all of those services that we have in abundance actually in East, and we're very good at the flow in East in terms of the delayed discharges as well. So for us to be sitting with a 1.1 million overspend attributed to set aside feels fundamentally wrong.
Yeah. Fiona
So
Wilson?
So I don't know if I'm going to answer your question, but I suppose just it's exactly what we are thinking. And if I can give you the example around mental health just now, that where Gillian and the team have done a huge amount of work around managing their occupancy into around a commission bed base, then actually it makes it, well, the question is, if we can't get people into rehab beds but we're not using them, I ask the question, then should we be doing something different? So I think what we're trying to do with the work Ian and Chris are doing is really understand our usage, so that we can, it's back to the how do we push it from an IJB perspective and say, how do we influence, how do we set a direction, because that's where we're needing to go. But we need to look at our performance, look at what we're doing, and how that impacts on the decision we're taking and how we escalate it. So there's no value in saying, well, I'd like to, for example, pull the money out of rehab and Royal Edinburgh. If actually we're overusing our beds, that doesn't make sense. But there is a reason actually, if Fiona Wilson from East Lothian can't get into a rehab bed, but we're not optimising, we can use that as a lever. So I think it's back to the testing. Actually, we've got the evidence, we've got the strategic direction, it's what we want for East Lothian people, and then it's bringing it back to the IJB. So I think COVID's probably just flung us a bit of a curveball around us being able to do that, but because money is so tight and resource and we want to show value for money and do the right thing for people, we're now moving on to that. So I'm hoping that answers it, Fiona, because I think it's back using the IJB.
Yeah, I think we have to consider how we would construct directions to help us actually lever some of that, so that we're not being accountable for a spend when we're trying to provide services and doing quite well at providing services that do keep people at home.
I think the work that Claire referred to earlier on, which I was going to actually ask you on, Claire, you've answered it. There was some individual level of financial measurement underway when Susan was there. Going back 3 or 4 years, and obviously, as you've just pointed out, I didn't know that had stalled. So, if that's picked up again, we may well get to a point where, for Ireland, I think, legitimately ask the question around if we increase the options out with the hospital, there should be a reward for that, in inverted commas, which is a transfer of the funding. That's the theory behind it. Whether or not in practice that's possible, I'm sure others would have a view on that. I've got one final question, Claire, that I should not answer this, but it's not immediately come to mind. Does the increase in set aside, is it influenced in any way by the increased activity to deal with the backlog?
No, not really. Within kind of unscheduled care, I think one of the big challenges within set aside now is their vacancy levels. So actually, they're having to bring in a lot of locums, high cost agency staff to fill gaps, and that's a lot of their pressure. And the other one that that pulls out, because I've just seen the set aside Q2 projections as well, and there's a big projected overspend within gastroenterology. And that was the drugs that were referenced before. So we need to go back and do a bit more digging with set aside colleagues to understand exactly what's driving that. So once I just get a report with numbers on it. So what I'll do is I'll forward that to some colleagues and ask them to put a bit more intelligence, because they work within those areas. But gastroenterology was a big one, along with the vacancies.
Thanks, Claire, and thanks for the questions. Any other questions before we move on? Go to the proper recommendations this time. No, not seeing any hands go up. So on this occasion, we are rightfully being asked to note the end of August 22 financial reviews undertaken with partners, and note the correspondence to Scottish Government regarding IJB COVID reserves. Are we okay with that?
Yes.
You're
We're
mute.
now at the next paper, which is on the MAT standards. Now, I wonder if it's worth explaining a little bit about that background before we go into the detail of the report, just for those that are not familiar with it, because I've had a lot of opportunity in the recent weeks to hear from people describing the emphasis being placed on these. So maybe for one or two that are with us, a little bit of background. Is it you, Fiona Wilson? Are you covering this?
No, Gillian Neal, our general manager, is going to cover this.
Gillian, would you mind just giving
do that?
a couple of sentences of
I've
background?
actually prepared a background for that very reason. So
well done.
I'm happy to start that, and then obviously we can get into the basis of the report. So thank you for giving me the opportunity just to share with you some information around the medication assisted treatment standards, which are known for MAT for short. But I think everybody on the call today will be aware that in Scotland we have a high level of drug-related deaths. And in 2021, the National Record of Statistics published and recorded 16 drug-related deaths for East Lothian. And sadly, you know, this showed that a variety of drugs were involved, and poly-drug use was sadly the norm. And the 16 drug-related deaths recorded in East Lothian in 2021 was actually an increase of 2 from the previous year, 2020. And really in response to the high number of drug-related deaths that are recorded across Scotland, the Drug Task Force has contributed to the development of the Medication Assisted Treatment Standards, or MAT as they're better known, really to help reduce deaths or other harms and to promote recovery. So you'll see in the pack in Appendix 1 that I did include, there are 10 MAT standards, and these are aimed at those who use really illicit opiates such as heroin, methadone, etc., because these individuals are really at the highest risk of death. So as I say, there are 10 MAT standards, and they're very much around or aimed at improving access, choice and care, and really allowing individuals the option to be assessed and start treatment on the same day, as long as that assessment is not contraindicated by a number of reasons. And I think it would be helpful, just before I go through the paper, because it's very much around the government. So what does that actually mean in practice? So what we've done over the last couple of months is that we've further developed our services so that individuals who would really fit this sort of the MAT standards around opiate use can gain access to assessment and treatment in the same day. And certainly from Monday, we are in a position that we can do that 5 days a week. So basically, if you have somebody, you know somebody, and we've got a window where actually somebody's really interested in starting on opiate replacement treatment, then they can self-present or be referred through our MELD contact service, or again through GP or self-presentation, and they will be given an appointment, assessment and possible treatment in the same day. Which is a real step forward. And I think what is really nice to see in the MAT standards, which I'm sure you'll all agree, is that there's a real encouragement about involving the family or the sort of named person in that person's life to be involved in this treatment, because it's also not just about treatment, it's ongoing engagement, and that's often where we struggle with individuals who have got chaotic lifestyles. It also offers individuals the right to advocacy and harm reduction. And what I mean by harm reduction is, again, is that sort of overdose awareness. It's about providing naloxone, which is the drug that can be administered and can save lives very quickly if somebody is under the influence of drugs. It looks at injectable equipment practices which are safe. It looks like blood-borne viruses, and again trying to screen out those most at risk, as well as things even down to wound care and injectable sites. So I think that's sort of a whistle-stop tour really to the background, and then I'm just happy to take you through the paper, because obviously, as you can imagine, there's quite strict governance around how we manage these or embed these standards and monitor our delivery within East Lothian.
Gillian, can we just pause there just for a second, just to see if anybody's got any points of clarity before you go into the report? Anybody wish any additional information, or are you happy for Gillian to carry on? Take the fact that no hands go up, as you've done a great job explaining that, Gillian, so I'll hand back to you. Oh, hold on. There's Mark. We've got a question from Marlon.
That sounds wonderful to have a same-day treatment. I wonder how you're sort of getting the word out. Are you using social media? Is that a means by which some of these people will contact you, or how is it getting, sort of publicized?
So that's a good question. So as you can imagine, we're trying to do this in a step approach, but we have our MELD and MELDAP colleagues through the Alcohol and Drug Forum, and our third sector providers. And again, I think really, as we embed the standards and improve service and access throughout the next few months, then it will be an ongoing programme of sharing the service and really publicising how people can access the service, because I think we're very aware at the moment that individuals need to come to us, but again, as we roll it out, then we need to look at how we can actually go out and about in East Lothian and engage with those that again are at highest risk. So we really need just to finalise really the communication and engagement plan, Marilyn, but again, our MELD and MELDAP colleagues are supporting us with that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marilyn. Okay, Gillian, do you want to just move back to the report?
Yeah, so thank you. As you'll see, the papers are in pages 75 to 104 in your pack. So really the paper is really just updating the East Lothian IJB in relation to the MAT standards, and really the requirement to embed and implement these standards really to enshrine a rights-based approach to immediate person-centred treatment for problem drug use linked to primary care, mental health and other support services. And I'm asking the IJB to consider the specific responses, actions and oversight arrangements required by the Scottish Government to achieve implementation of the MAT standards, to approve and sign the MAT standards implementation plan that's in Appendix 3 of your pack, and again to note the quarterly progress update against the delivery of MAT and implementation plan. The background, which I've included in the paper, is just a summary, but I intended just to give you a bit more detail, which I've done. I think it's important to highlight that initially the Scottish Government had announced that these standards needed to be embedded by April 2022. However, in June 2022, Public Health Scotland published a MAT implementation benchmarking report, which is included in Appendix 2, which showed that whilst progress on implementation had been made in all areas, this MAT standards 1 to 5 had not been fully implemented by April 22, and that's for a variety of reasons, and I think COVID is one of those. So the benchmarking report provided the RAG status for each partnership area, and East Lothian was RAG rated red for MAT 1 and amber for MAT 2 to 5. So really in response to this report, and in order to achieve full implementation of MAT standards 1 to 5 by the end of March, beginning of April 2023, ministers have recommended a number of actions, and they're summarised in 3.2. So by end of September, chief officers and chief executives across both the council and the NHS have to personally sign the implementation plans. Chief officers and chief executives take shared and visible responsibility for delivering the standards, and we have to report on progress against the delivery of the MAT standards on a quarterly basis. The government also announced some additional funding, and initially our bid was 2,200 and 4,500, but sadly the government came back to us to say that they didn't have as much money as they thought, but MELDAP matched the shortfall, and that has allowed us to recruit a number of staff across both our core substance use service and MELD in relation to recruiting clinical nurse specialists who are autonomous decision makers and able to implement sort of same-day assessment and treatment. So as I said, over the last few months, considerable work has been undertaken across all alcohol drug partners within East Lothian to ensure that we meet the criteria and principles set against each of the MAT standards. And we've got a local plan and also the implementation plan that is part of your pack, really just to monitor our progress, and a lot of the governance arrangements that we're meeting with chief officers across East and Mid because our drug and alcohol partnership is joint across East and Mid. We've got monthly meetings, quarterly meetings, and obviously it's being reported in through the Mental Health and Substance Use Change Board. The quarterly report will be presented to East Lothian senior management team, and equally we need to provide regular updates to the IJB as well. We've also been asked to submit a progress report by the end of this week, which is basically taking the implementation plan that I've attached and giving an update on each MAT standard, and we are on track to fully deliver and implement all 5 standards by the end of March 2023. And just finally, I think it's important, we do have quite a lot of engagement around the MAT standards. The Scottish Government has established an implementation support team called MIST, and they are supporting each individual partnership around the delivery of MAT, but equally we've got quite a lot of data collection to undertake, and they've been very helpful in providing us with templates that populate sort of graphs and the returns that will go to the government. And all our local stakeholders are engaged in East Lothian because we also have a project charter and quality improvement methodology agreed that we'll undertake, and it very much has to and will involve people with lived experience to ensure that their experience and feedback really informs delivery of the treatment and support. So that is just a quick summary of MAT standards and some of the governance that is required around it.
No, that's really helpful, Julie. Thank you for that very helpful explanation, both at the start and through the paper. Clearly, a really important piece of work. I'm sure we'd all want to see it succeed, as the plan suggests it could. So at this point, happy for Julie to take any questions from anybody, any points of clarification. John.
I just wanted to thank Gillian for an excellent report and all the work that clearly lies behind it by her and the substance use service team, and just to react to knowing that people can access assessment and treatment same day now. I think that's pretty crucial. It's not that long since people were facing quite long delays between presenting to the service and getting treatment, and that gap brings risk, as we know, and people need help when they're ready to present, and they may not sustain that effort and come to harm in the interim. So that's really hugely welcome. And just to note the development of the substance use service, particularly the primary care arm of it, which has been developed in recent years. We now have sort of outreach specialist support services within GP practices working alongside GP teams, and that's really helpful for particularly our clients who find that much easier to access than having to go to the hospital or the ESC centre. So thank you, and hopefully we can look forward to the hard work being reflected in reduced drug-related deaths and improved outcomes.
Absolutely. Just a very quick little story from my short experience yesterday. I was in getting my COVID and flu jab. I was on the bus and I was looking down from my elevated position in the bus at this middle-aged guy sitting in the streets in what can only be described as unkempt appearance and clothing that had seen the better day about 25 years ago. And people were walking past him in droves. And I was thinking to myself, how many people are judging that individual as they walk by him, in the same way that we are probably all guilty in some way or other of judging people that come forward with drug addiction. And it's a societal problem, I think, that we've got, that we make judgments on people based on our perception. And I felt guilty yesterday that what I should have done is actually went down and tried to help that person because he looked as if he needed help desperately. And I suspect that, as John says, many people that come to the same day treatment will be better served as a consequence of it, because they may well only have that one window where they come in and say, right, I'm going to do something about this now. And it's great, Gillian, you've been able to secure that. So well done to you and all your colleagues. But for us as a board, the best thing we can do is spread the message about stigma. And that will help immensely, I think, in the demystifying of this problem that people have got. I don't think many people take drugs without a backdrop of some description as to why they've got to that point in their lives. So I think we should be sympathetic towards it. Anyway, Siobhan.
Yeah, no, thank you. I just want to say thanks, Gillian, just to echo the comments made by John, because when you look at some of these deadlines that you're having to adhere to, you know, they are extremely, extremely tight. So I really take my hat off to you and your colleagues. And if you could pass that message on to them. And it's tragic that there's 16 that's gone up by 2 from last year in East Lothian. And it's not just Scotland. You know, we've got the worst drug-related deaths in Europe. What I just wanted to check was, of the 16, if their breakdown of men and women, and also one of the things you're right to mention that people's experiences and taking that trauma-based approach because of different things that have happened in people's lives as a result of that. And I think anything we can do to pass on to MELDAP for filling in that gap, because there was a gap in funding, and I wondered what would have happened if they hadn't stepped in. So I really, you know, anything we can do to pass on our thanks to Martin Bonner at MELDAP for stepping up to do that. And he has previously been along to IJBs and presented, and I think if we can give him another opportunity, because we've got quite a few new members to come forward, to really give him that space and time to talk about what he does and the impact he makes. But finally, it was just around the resources and the capacity. This is going to be really, really kind of really tight, quite difficult, and you've got some really quite practical things, and I think you're probably working your way through them. But I suppose everybody's going to be in the position of recruiting, and I just wondered how you were managing that.
We've been very fortunate that the money that we secured through MIST and MELDAP, we've actually secured all of the sort of nursing support that we require, because again, I think it's allowed people promotion, and it's allowed us to get non-medical prescribers working in a more of a sort of autonomous way, obviously under supervision of the consultant. However, our MELD, who are our third sector colleagues, are really struggling around recruitment, and you'll see in the plan that they are now launching another campaign, and we're hoping that they might have some success by the end of the year. But if not, then we need to think about alternative models, because again, that sort of peer support, lived experience support that MELD provides is invaluable, and again, that's often something that really helps with the ongoing engagement of these individuals.
Is that okay, Siobhan?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions or comments, we'll just go back to Gillian's already referenced recommendations. You'll see them at 2.1. I'm not going to read them again. Gillian read them out. So the key one is obviously to approve and sign the MAT standards. So I'm assuming that we're all content to do as asked, to note as in 1 and 3 and approve as in 2.
We'll need to do a roll call vote for recommendation 2, Chair.
We will indeed. Thank you, Fiona. So I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much. If members are happy to agree by general agreement, recommendations 1 and 3.
Agreed. Yep.
Thank you. And for recommendation 2, the approval of the standards implementation plan, I'll come to each voting member individually. If you just let me know which way you'd like to vote. Siobhan Akhtar.
Agreed.
Lachlan Bruce. Lachlan.
Apologies, struggling with my mic there. Approved.
Thank you. Fiona Ireland.
Approved.
Lynn Jardine.
Approved.
Carol McFarlane.
Approved.
Peter Murray.
Approved.
Thank you. That's the recommendation approved unanimously.
Thank you. And Gillian, we look forward to the next reporting stage where hopefully we'll get some more good news in terms of progress.
Indeed.
Okay, thank you all for that. We'll move on to item 6, which is the IJB directions policy. And Claire, I believe it's yourself.
It is, thanks, Chair. So I'd just like to introduce this report with a recommendation of adopting the new IJB directions policy. So the framing of new policy follows on from an IJB development session that we held back in June of this year, which many of you were at. And the content of the draft policy reflects some of the discussion we had at that session. We do have a directions policy in place currently, which was introduced in 2015. So there's much of that needs to be updated. Since 2015, practice has really developed in the way that IJBs have used directions, and there's also been new statutory guidance that was introduced in 2020. So the introduction of a new and updated direction policy, I think, is timely in the sense that we adopted the new IJB strategic plan back in September. We're now looking at the annual delivery plan, and also we'll be looking at the directions that we have currently and whether they need to be amended in order to reflect any of our new strategic commitments. So we're hoping that the new policy, once agreed, will help inform the development of and the review of our new directions, and it'll also form a framework for the ongoing development and management of directions, to help to ensure that we reflect good practice and that we're in line with the statutory guidance. So there's a number of key principles, and these are highlighted in the assessment section of the covering report as a set of bullets. Just to go through these very briefly, just at a very summary level, the main key principles is that IJB will develop directions that are based on engagement with change boards, SPGs, and at officer level, and will also involve discussion and engagement with East Lothian Council and NHS Lothian colleagues. Another principle is that although there will be key points in the year when we'll do a fuller review of directions, for example, when a budget is set or when we introduce a new strategic plan, the intention is that the introduction of new directions or review of existing directions should take place throughout the year in response to any new developments or in response to decisions made by the IJB. We already have in our IJB reporting template a section where report contributors are asked to consider whether a direction is needed or a revision to an existing direction is needed, and we'll be drawing new attention to that section of the report. Another principle is the measurement of progress against directions and looking at how we can introduce measures to help us keep track of directions and to get a sense of what sort of progress is being made. Ownership of individual directions will be by change boards, and we will provide 6 monthly updates to the IJB on progress. You can also draw your attention to the appendices to the draft policy. So we have a process diagram which shows the basic stages in developing a direction, and we also have a template which will help with the drafting of new directions or revision of existing ones, and that helps to ensure that what we're writing reflects what it says in our policy. So happy to take any questions, and there is a recommendation for the IJB, 2 recommendations for them to consider the content of the draft policy and to approve adoption of it.
Thank you, Claire. Very welcome development in the way in which directions are used. Well, IJBs will still be in their current form for some considerable time, even with the onset of the NCS. So we need to use directions wisely. We need to understand them, And I think, as Claire pointed out at the outset, we need to work with our partners to ensure that when we do lay them before them, that we've got some clear understanding that there'll be a likely success in their implementation and delivery. And our monitoring of them, which Claire has mentioned, is really important. It's something we've perhaps not done as well as we could have over the previous years, and it's something I'd like to see more clarity on, is the relationship between them being laid and how we then monitor implementation. So well done, Claire, for this good piece of work. I'll invite any questions that you may have. Looks like you've done such a good job. No, Shameen?
Thanks, Claire. It was just to ask around the progress measures that will be developed for individual directions. And I know that the IJB strategic plan is also part of the council plan, and that has 50, they're going to be looking at 50 key performance measures. And I just wondered, I'm sure that'll be kind of interlinked with what some of those 50 key performance measures might be, just to avoid any kind of duplications for either partner. And I just want to kind of just get reassurance that that'll be the case, so there's not duplication.
Yeah, so at the moment, Shameen, we've been looking at the delivery plan and the indicators in relation to the strategic objectives, and they will also be linked to the directions. So we're hoping that there's consistency across them. I think for some of the directions, it'll be more progress measures than performance measures in terms of certain milestones being achieved. So we will consider that as and when we draft the directions, and make sure that's an integral part of what we're writing in the direction is reflected in what we're saying for performance or the progress measure is.
Okay, thank you. And we'll be looking at the outcomes as well for citizens within that. Yeah. Thank you.
I mean, it probably is worth saying a little bit about the delivery plan that we're developing at the moment. So that's outcome based. So it's looking at strategic objectives and the outcomes that these objectives are seeking to achieve. Alongside performance measures, we'll be mapping the directions against the strategic objectives. So it should give quite a rounded picture of, the outcomes, progress, and how we're measuring performance, and on a sort of qualitative and quantitative basis.
Thank you.
Yeah, Shameen, that's a very good point. I'm glad you raised it, that it should be all about outcomes. Very relevant question and observation you've made. So thank you. Andy, you got anything else you wish to ask or comment on? No. Fiona, I'm going to assume that we need to do the roll call for the approval.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So, Fiona, I'll hand over to you then, if that's okay.
Yep, that's fine. Thank you. As Claire outlined, the recommendations are for the IJB to consider the content of the draft directions policy and to approve adoption of the policy. So if I could come to each member, and if you could let me know which way you would like to vote, please. Shameen Akhtar.
Agreed.
Thank you. Lachlan Bruce. Lachlan.
Agreed.
Thank you. Fiona Ireland.
Agreed.
Lynn Jardine.
Agreed.
Carol McFarlane.
Agreed.
Peter Murray.
Agreed.
Thank you. That's the recommendations approved unanimously.
Thank you. And thanks, Claire, for all your work on this. You'll be glad it's come to fruition, I'm sure. Okay, that brings us to the end of the meeting. Can I just conclude by a couple of thanks, because I know that a few people are on the call, probably everybody in their own different ways, but from my knowledge, I know that Claire has done an awful lot of work in the finance. So thank you very much, Claire, for that. Clearly, Gillian, you've done a shed load of work on this match standard, so well done to you. And Claire, just to reiterate our thanks to you for your particular part in today's agenda and progress, as I would call it. So thanks everybody for their participation today, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.